So that's our real goal today, is to think about how do we take these things that have been created for people with disabilities or thinking like that and really understand how they can get a universal application. And that's what I hope we can do with learning. And that's what happened over time. I'll go on to my next slide. Is when you think about who can benefit from this, not just individuals who have a disability. That's a great thing to consider, but that's not everybody in your classroom. If you really do universal design correctly, and I did skip a slide, so I apologize for that, but I don't think we needed it right now, and it was a little interactive. If we really think about who benefits from something like universal design for learning, it could be individuals who speak English as a second language. It could be international students. It can be adult learners. It can be individuals with disabilities, of course. It can be just busy people. The example I like to give there is I was teaching at the community college, and I made sure every text that I taught was available in audio format, not just written. And I had a mom who had 3 kids, and her only time when she could get to do her reading was when she was in the car. She was not an auditory learner. She was not really accustomed to learning by listening to books, but her only time to be able to do the work was when she could listen to the car going back and forth to campus and daycare and things like that. So universal design can benefit in that way. There's a wrong word here, I have to apologize, but a professional whose teaching style, says advising here, is inconsistent with the individual's preferred learning style. Most of us teach by talking. Why? That's probably how we were taught. Even though I have slides here and I have video, I'm still doing an awful lot of talking. And if your students are not auditory learners and don't process that information that way, they may not learn well that way. So providing some scaffolding of information in multiple formats is going to really help them, because we don't have to change everything we're doing, but we have to think about trying to be accommodating to the multiple needs of students. And in the end, if you do universal design for learning really well, everybody can really benefit. Any questions so far?
I had a question. If you could go over sort of the main areas of learning styles, what they are. Like, I know there's audio, there's kinesthetic, there's, if you could.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I took those slides out today because I wanted to focus in on the syllabus. But, you know, people do talk about learning styles in multiple ways. Learning styles can be social, like you can be a social learner or an independent learner. That can be one of the pieces of it. You can also think about being an auditory learner, being a visual learner, being a kinesthetic learner, being really hands-on. And thinking about things those ways, with those multiple ways that people like to learn, can be really, really helpful, especially I think with community college students who don't always have a metacognitive sense of how they learn, and having them understand what works best for them. I know I'm not necessarily a kinesthetic learner, but when I was studying for the SATs and I had to learn really rote vocabulary, I was also a swimmer. So I would look at a word at the end of the pool, swim a lap, memorize it, look at another word, swim a lap, memorize it, because I was doing something really rote, but I combined it with some activity, and it's the only way I was able to get that to stick. Does that help, Laura?
Yes, thank you.
We actually have, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but we have a whole web page that has about learning styles that maybe people would want to look at and think about what that means. But talking about the key elements of universal design for learning, we talk about curriculum, which is your syllabus, which is where we're going to focus in on today, and what you're teaching and how you want to present that. We also talk about instruction, and hand in hand with instruction is assessment, whether it's a real formal assessment you do or an on-the-fly assessment, making sure people are understanding what you're doing. And then finally, the environment. We try to talk about it that you want to make sure it's usable by all learners without the need for accommodations, but I don't know that that's always possible. Some students are going to need things like sign language interpreters or other kinds of accommodations necessary. But thinking about, you know, putting the closed captioning, for example, always on whenever you show a video in your class is a really great practice, because it does help everybody we just talked about as learners, not just the individuals who need that because they may have a hearing challenge. And this is my last kind of background for what we talk about with universal design for learning. And again, these slides in my initial intro lecture is available on Blackboard that Laura can show you where that is. But we also talk about thinking about all users and creating access for them. And going digital is a really great way to do that. But you have to make sure what you put up digitally is accessible. So those kind of have to go back and forth on each other. Not just throwing something up online, it makes it accessible, but you also have to make sure that if it's up there, that students can then enlarge it, change the color, manipulate it, listen, turn on the audio, the text to voice on it on your computer. And that really, by doing all that, ultimately makes it really flexible. But flexible is not just the pieces of paper and the things you post on there. Flexible is also kind of the UDL mindset. Like, does this test really the only way to test everybody's knowledge of this material? If we were doing assessment, we would be talking about that. Is this really the only reading that I can give my students? Or are there other readings or podcasts or videos that might accomplish that? So we talk a lot about that. Okay. We talked a little bit about access, and since you all were talking about disability and access, I'll spend a little time on this slide. What universal design can do, it provides access to learning, not just information. So some people think it's just a delivery device, universal design, but it actually can be about how you think about the learning. It can allow the student to control the method of accessing information while the teacher monitors the learning process and initiates any beneficial methods. So if you have things in multiple formats, it allows the student to choose which way they're going to go and approach this material. It does not necessarily remove academic challenges. This is not some magic bullet, but what it does is it will remove barriers to that access. And the bottom line is, and I often go to colleges, they say, please don't use the word universal design. We've had that here and not everybody loved it. So I'll go there and say, I'm just talking about teaching to diverse learners. It doesn't matter what we're really talking about. We're really just talking about good teaching. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And those of you that are here today, I'm sure, are really conscientious about that, or else, well, I don't know why else you'd be here.